Brooke Shields' life in the spotlight did not begin with a choice. It began before she could even understand what fame meant. Born on May 31st, 1965, in New York City, she entered a world that was already divided. Her parents separated when she was still a baby, and from that moment on, her life was shaped mostly by her mother, Terry. Terry was not just a parent. She was also a planner, a manager, and someone who believed deeply that her daughter was meant for something big. Just days after Brooke was born, Terry was already telling people that her baby would be a star. What might sound like a proud mother's dream was, in reality, a serious plan. Brooke was not simply raised like other children. She was guided toward fame from the very beginning. Before she could walk or speak, she was already in front of cameras. At only 11 months old, she appeared in her first advertisement. From there, more work followed quickly. Big brands noticed her unique look, and she became a popular child model. To many people, it looked like success. But behind the scenes, it meant that her childhood was very different from others. While most children were learning to play and explore, Brooke was learning how to pose, how to listen to adults, and how to perform. Her life became structured around work, not play. This early exposure to the adult world slowly removed the normal experiences of childhood. Instead of school events and simple fun, she had photo shoots, schedules, and expectations. As she grew older, something even more concerning began to happen. People started to treat her not like a child, but like someone older. Comments were made about her looks and maturity that did not match her age. These ideas were not pushed away. Instead, they were often encouraged by the people around her, especially those who saw her as a product that could bring attention and money. This created a confusing and uncomfortable situation where the line between childhood and adulthood became unclear. One of the most troubling parts of her early life came when she was still very young and involved in projects that sparked serious debate. Some people defended these projects as art, while others saw them as inappropriate and harmful. Despite the criticism, her career continued to grow. The attention, whether good or bad, made her more famous. But at the same time, it placed her in situations that no child should have to face. Brooke later spoke about how she often felt like she did not have control over her own image or decisions. Adults made choices for her, and she followed along because that was the life she had been given. At home, things were not always stable either. Her mother, who played such a large role in her career, also struggled with alcohol. This added another layer of difficulty to Brooke's life. The person she depended on for protection was also someone she sometimes had to take care of emotionally. Living in that kind of environment meant she had to grow up faster than she should have. She learned to read moods, avoid conflict, and manage situations that were far beyond what a child should handle. All of these experiences shaped her in deep ways. By the time she reached her early teenage years, she was already a well-known figure, but she was also carrying pressures and responsibilities that most adults would find overwhelming. Her story during these early years is not just about fame. It is about how quickly a childhood can be changed when the world sees a child as something to be used rather than protected. It sets the stage for everything that came next in her life, including the moments that would bring even more attention, controversy, and personal struggle. As Brooke Shields moved into her early teenage years, her fame grew even bigger, but so did the pressure around her. By the time she was about 10 and 11 years old, she was already involved in projects that made people across the country argue about what was right and what was wrong. One of the most talked about moments came when she appeared in photographs that many people believed were not appropriate for someone her age. These images were defended by some adults as artistic work, but others strongly disagreed and felt that a line had been crossed. For Brooke, this was not a debate she had chosen to be part of. She was a child, surrounded by adults making decisions, and she trusted them because she believed they knew what was best. Around the same time, she was cast in the film Pretty Baby, where she played a young girl growing up in a difficult and adult environment. The role itself was very serious and included scenes that made many viewers uncomfortable, especially because of how young she was at the time. One particular moment that stood out was a scene where she shared a kiss with an older actor, and later she revealed that it was her first kiss ever. Instead of being a private and meaningful experience, It became something that happened on a film set with cameras and crew watching. That alone shows how unusual her life had become. For many people, their first experiences are personal and emotional, but for Brooke, they were often turned into performances. Even though the film received praise in some circles, it also brought strong criticism. Some people believed it was an important story told in a bold way, while others believed it was simply wrong to place a child in that situation. Despite all the arguments, the film made her even more famous, and her career continued moving forward. This created a pattern that followed her for years. The more controversial the project, the more attention it received, and the more her image became tied to ideas that were far beyond her age. As she grew older, the roles and opportunities she was given continued to blur the line between youth and adulthood. In 1980, she starred in The Blue Lagoon, a film about two teenagers growing up alone on an island and developing a romantic relationship. Brooke was only 14 years old at the time, yet the film focused heavily on themes of attraction and maturity. While body doubles were used for certain scenes, the overall message still placed her in a very adult light. This added to the growing image that the public had of her, even though she was still a young teenager trying to understand her own identity. At the same time, rumors and stories about her personal life began to spread, many of which were not true. These stories were often used as a way to promote films or create more public interest, showing how little control she had over how her life was presented. The situation became even more intense when she appeared in a famous advertising campaign for Calvin Klein jeans. In the ad, she delivered a line that quickly became one of the most talked about phrases of the time. While she may not have fully understood the deeper meaning behind it, the public reaction was immediate and strong. Some people found it shocking, while others criticized it for being too suggestive for someone her age. The ads were banned in certain places, and debates about them filled newspapers and television shows. Despite all the controversy, the campaign was successful in terms of sales, which again showed how attention, even negative attention, could be turned into profit. For Brooke, however, the experience was confusing. She later explained that she did not fully understand why people were reacting the way they did. She thought she was simply doing her job, yet she found herself being judged and criticized by strangers. This period of her life highlights how she was often placed in situations where the consequences were much bigger than anything she could control. Adults around her made decisions that shaped her image, while she was left to deal with the reactions. By the time she reached her late teenage years, Brooke Shields was not just a young actress or model. She had become a symbol in a larger conversation about fame, youth, and responsibility. But inside, she was still someone trying to grow up, figure out who she was, and understand a world that had treated her like an adult long before she was ready. By the time Brooke Shields turned 18, many people believed her life was already set. She had been in major films, appeared in famous advertisements, and built a name that almost everyone recognized. From the outside, it looked like she had everything a young star could want. But inside, she felt something very different. She had spent most of her life being guided by others, shaped by expectations, and pushed into roles that did not always match who she truly was. So, when she made the decision to step away from Hollywood and attend Princeton University, it shocked many people. In an industry where young stars are expected to chase fame and stay visible at all costs, her choice felt almost rebellious. People in Hollywood questioned her decision and even warned that leaving at the height of her fame could end her career. Some believed she was making a mistake that she would regret forever. But for Brooke, it was not about turning her back on success. It was about finding a part of herself that had been missing for years. She wanted a normal experience, a chance to learn, and an opportunity to be seen as more than just an image on a screen. However, her time at Princeton was not easy. Instead of finding complete peace, she faced a new kind of challenge. Some students treated her differently because of her fame. They either avoided her or reduced her to a stereotype, assuming she was only there because of her looks and not her intelligence. There were also moments when the attention became uncomfortable and even cruel. A student publication attempted to create a project that mocked her image, which quickly turned into a larger controversy on campus. While the project was eventually stopped, the situation showed how even in a place meant for learning, she could not fully escape the image the world had created for her. Despite all this, Brooke did not give up. There were times when she felt lonely and considered leaving, but she pushed herself to stay. Slowly, she began to build a more stable sense of identity. She joined student activities, formed friendships, and worked hard in her classes. One important moment came when a professor challenged her to speak more confidently and trust her own thoughts. Instead of allowing her to hide behind silence, he encouraged her to prove that she belonged there. That experience helped her grow in a way that her earlier life never allowed. She began to see herself as more than just a public figure. She was a student, a thinker, and someone capable of making her own decisions. By the time she graduated in 1987, she had changed. She was no longer just the young girl the world had watched grow up. She had developed strength, confidence, and a clearer understanding of who she wanted to be. But stepping back into Hollywood after graduation brought a new kind of disappointment. Instead of welcoming her back, the industry treated her absence like a failure. She was told she was no longer relevant and that people had moved on. This rejection was difficult to accept, especially after she had worked so hard to build a different future for herself. It forced her to question everything again. She had taken a risk to grow as a person, but now she faced the possibility that it had cost her the career she once had. During this time, she stepped away from the spotlight and spent time trying to recover emotionally. It was not just about finding work again. It was about rebuilding her confidence after years of being judged and controlled. When she eventually returned to acting, it was not easy. She felt unsure of herself and even questioned her own abilities. On her first day back on set, fear took over, and she worried that she had forgotten how to do the very thing that once defined her life. This moment shows how deeply her past experiences had affected her. Even though she had years of success behind her, the lack of control and constant pressure had left lasting effects. She was not just starting a new chapter in her career. She was trying to rebuild her sense of self in a world that had always expected her to be something else. As Brooke Shields tried to rebuild her career in her early 20s, she entered one of the most difficult and painful periods of her life. After facing rejection from Hollywood and struggling to find her place again, she was also dealing with deep emotional pressure. She wanted to work, to prove herself, and to move forward, but the industry she returned to was not kind or supportive. It was during this vulnerable time that something happened, which she kept hidden for many years. While trying to secure roles and rebuild her career, she accepted a dinner invitation from a powerful Hollywood executive who promised he could help her. At first, everything seemed normal. It felt like a professional meeting, something that could lead to new opportunities. But after dinner, he suggested they go to his hotel room, saying she could call a cab from there. In that moment, it did not seem dangerous. It seemed like something simple and harmless. But once inside the room, the situation changed quickly and in a way she could not have expected. The man suddenly came out of the bathroom without clothes and moved toward her in a forceful and aggressive way. Brooke froze. She did not react the way people might imagine in such situations. Instead of fighting or screaming, her body shut down as a way to survive. She later explained that her only thought was to stay alive and get out safely. This response, often called a freeze response, is something many people experience during moments of extreme fear. It does not mean they agree with what is happening. It means their mind is trying to protect them in the only way it can. After managing to escape, she ran to a friend's apartment and broke down in tears. But what followed was just as painful in a different way. Instead of immediately blaming the man who hurt her, she began to blame herself. She questioned her own actions, wondering why she had trusted him, why she had gone to the room, and whether she had done something wrong. This kind of thinking is sadly common among people who go through such experiences. Fear, confusion, and shame can make it hard to see the situation clearly. At that time, she chose not to report what happened. The world was different then, and many victims were not believed or were treated unfairly when they spoke up. She feared that coming forward could destroy her chances of working again. So she stayed silent. She carried the memory with her for decades, keeping it hidden while continuing to live her life in the public eye. On the outside, her life continued to move forward. She became involved in relationships, including her marriage to Andre Agassi, which attracted a lot of public attention. To many people, they looked like a perfect couple, combining fame, beauty, and success. But behind that image, there were struggles that were not visible. Their relationship had moments of tension and emotional difficulty. Brooke later shared that certain comments made during the marriage affected her deeply, especially those connected to her appearance. Having spent so much of her life being judged based on how she looked, even small remarks could reopen old wounds. This shows how the experiences of her early life continued to affect her, even in adulthood. The marriage eventually ended, and while it was a painful chapter, it also became part of her journey toward understanding herself better. What makes this period of her life so important is not just the events themselves, but how they reveal the long-term impact of everything she had gone through. The lack of control she experienced as a child, the pressure to meet expectations, and the way she was treated by the industry all shaped how she responded to difficult situations later on. Her silence about the assault was not weakness. It was a reflection of the environment she had been raised in, where speaking out often came with serious risks. For many years, she carried that experience quietly, focusing on moving forward while still dealing with the emotional weight it left behind. This chapter of her life shows a deeper side of her story, one that goes beyond fame and success, and reveals the strength it takes to survive moments that are both frightening and deeply personal. As the years went on, Brooke Shields slowly began to build a more stable and peaceful life, even though the past still followed her in many ways. After her divorce from Andre Agassi, she was not actively looking for another relationship. She had already experienced how difficult love could be when it was mixed with fame, pressure, and public attention. But sometimes, life changes in quiet and unexpected ways. In 1999, something simple happened that would lead to a new chapter. While walking her dog on the set of a studio, she met Chris Henchy. Their meeting was not planned or dramatic. It was natural and calm, which was something Brooke had rarely experienced in her personal life. Chris did not treat her like a celebrity or a product. He treated her like a normal person, and that made a big difference. They became friends first, and that friendship created a strong base for their relationship. In 2001, they got married, and later they started a family together. For Brooke, this part of her life brought a sense of stability that she had been missing for many years. However, even during this happier time, she faced another serious challenge. After the birth of her child, she experienced postpartum depression, a condition that affects many women but is often misunderstood. For Brooke, it was a dark and confusing period. She felt deep sadness, fear, and a sense of being overwhelmed. It was not something she could control, and it was not something that could simply be fixed with positive thinking. She decided to speak openly about her experience and wrote about it in her memoir. This was an important step because many women struggle in silence, and her voice helped bring attention to a topic that people often avoid. But instead of receiving only support, she became the center of a public controversy. In 2005, actor Tom Cruise went on television and criticized her for using medication to treat her condition. During an interview on the Today Show,